you're still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel. Now, office space demand jumped to its highest in the second quarter. Does this signal a return to pre-pandemic levels for the market?
Now, to discuss that, as well as the President's veto of the Bulacan Economic Zone, we have on the show David Leechiu, CEO of Leechiu Property Consultants. David, good morning. Thank you for joining us. I think you're on mute.
Can you come off of mute, David? There we go.
Let's double check again. Let's check that again. Can you hear us now? Can we have a bit of an audio check with you, David?
Hello.
All right, good. Okay.
Well, thank you for having me on the show.
Our pleasure, of course. Now, again, let's pick up on that report regarding the veto of the economic zone in Bulacan here. How is that possibly going to affect the property market in the central Luzon? I mean, it's not yet completely off the table here, but is that delay going to be worrisome?
Yeah, I guess this is part of the transition between old and new administrations, and both parties have to just align. I'm sure the previous administration had very good reasons to make changes at this early stage in the new administration. So, and of course, the proponents on the other side will also have reasons to see how it could be restored. At the end of the day, I think it's still very early days. Because the plot of land we're talking about isn't being marketed to any of the foreigners just yet, although there are funders waiting behind the scenes to be able to get this project going. People just want to get this project off the ground, literally, and everyone's hoping that the airport is completed sooner rather than later.
Do you agree with NEDA Secretary Balisacan when he says that this will not really hamper foreign investors simply because they care less about the incentives and more about, let's say, ease of doing business? But then you do have Senator Amy Marcos saying this might cause, a chilling effect. A chilling effect. That's what she said. So the question here is, do you agree that the president should be reviewing all of these incentives right now, or should we just be doing status quo and implementing what was already done by the previous admin?
I think there is a concern that I think the biggest concern that many people have is how to manage this debt, and I guess they have, with every person very smart in the room on both camps, they have every reason to review and did what they did. So I don't think, not knowing the behind the scenes activities is kind of. I wouldn't want to preempt or presume anything on why certain things were being done. But I think the biggest issue is how to manage the debt of the government. And I suppose the incentives will either make the government feel like they are losing out on revenue that they otherwise could have incurred. And so this is one of the biggest tax events of the business sector. The size of this project, the entire landmass is probably something like 2,500 hectares. If you count all the other peripheral developments, that's a massive tax base from just the real estate perspective alone. What about the transfer of titles? What about funding? What about doc stamps when it comes to the debt and companies that are going to be erected and created on back of this project? So there's many things that the government's kind of busy evaluating right now, and being one of the biggest sources of funding, meaning tax revenue, I guess the government has every right and measure to be able to review the incentives it's given in the previous administration.
A quick follow-up on that, David. I mean, you have now PEZA coming forward with a proposal that instead of coming up with a new legislation, why not register the economic zone under PEZA? Is that a more viable option given your experience as well with PEZA?
I think in the last 30, 35 years since PEZA was created, I do think that PEZA is the best platform for many foreign investors to qualify for that, whether you're BPO, manufacturing, tourism. And now that it's in place, we would encourage that to continue to be rolled out to to investors and to the both local and foreign, because the PESA laws today only tax the only give tax incentives to tenants. They continue to tax the other side of the equation, which is the developer side. Whoever puts up the building, whoever builds the roads, all those people will continue to be taxed entities. It's really just the tenants locating in these places that are going to enjoy tax incentives. So indirectly, the government is still taxing those tenants by way of capturing the revenue from the tenants to the landlords.
David, speaking of, what's the update on this? I think it was 30% work in the office or no incentives, and people trying to seek for a more hybrid and more flexible arrangement. What is the sector lobbying for at this moment, and what's being given to them?
I do think that some compromise will be achieved between the BPO sector and the government. The BPO sector is the largest employer of the Philippines, and it is responsible for why it is a meaningful factor on why the Philippines continues to perform gracefully through COVID and through every other global crisis that has hit the world in the last 25 years. And so we do need to listen to the needs of the BPO sector. I do think there will be a compromise in the works because we all have to appreciate that 120,000 people, new jobs are created in the Philippines because of the BPO sector. Last year, at a time when globally people are contracting jobs, and there's a lot of talk about the upcoming recession in the US. That frankly excites me very much because that event will continue to bring more jobs to the Philippines once people figure things out in the West.
Okay, more to that point, are we well positioned to actually absorb that should that impending recession, especially in the West, really blow up? At the same time, I mean, like what you mentioned earlier, there's been remarkable growth in the office space demand here, especially for the second quarter, 106%, at least quarter on quarter, mostly, of course, driven by outsourcing companies. So do you expect that momentum to carry on?
I do expect it to carry on because we are continuing to talk to many brands who have big plans for Philippines. We just leased out a very big building called 5 Neo of the SM and Rufino family. That's a 55,000 square meter leasable building, and we did it at the height of COVID. The entire building is 100% leased out, and that would not have been possible in this time if not for the BPO sector continuing to grow. And it wouldn't be possible if it was not a reaction to the cost-saving programs that many corporations are adopting as a result of COVID and Ukraine. And now that this third element, this third level of uncertainty, the recession in the US, is entering the equation, more companies are saying, okay, we don't have time to experiment in other labor markets. There really is just one India. There really is just one Philippines. We can't find labor markets of that scale for that price anywhere else in the world. We will continue to do this expansion in the Philippines and India. And just as they expand in provincial sites in India, they will continue to expand in the Philippines.
David, what's your sentiment or feeling on the position of the new administration with regard to POGOs? Are they going to be more welcoming, crack down? Give us your take.
There's a lot of heat in this morning, Danny. So, I mean, and I'm trying to sidestep these issues. So, the good news is that we do need the POGO sector if we want to bring the office sector back to pre-COVID levels, because the POGO sector was such a big component of office demand. I don't see that coming so quickly. This early in the administration, I think it's too early to say. However, for the first time in 24 months, we have seen 21,000 square meters of space. Actually, office leasing being done in the POGO sector in the last 3 months. So the periods from April, May, and June. And is that coincidental and timed with the onset of the new administration? We don't know. However, the ones who occupy and continue to pay rent, they are starting to populate their office space again. The companies from the POGO sector. Second is that the dormitories that they vacated 2 years ago because they couldn't come back to the Philippines, they're starting to repopulate them again. It is a very strong sign that they are starting to expand again in the Philippines. How fast? Too early to say. I am very hopeful, but life could be disappointing also.
But does that mean also that they're more and more coming to terms with the new tax regime for POGOs?
I would think so. I would think so. And it's not just about China. Like we always said. I mean, it's not just always about China. And like this particular company we're servicing, they only have 5% of the employees that are China-based. The market they service is almost just 5% Chinese, and everything else is regional or European. So there are more and more companies like that discovering the Philippines. It's not just the Chinese companies. And the opening of borders is what's allowing them to come back in. And unfortunately, those borders took time to open because, COVID was such a wild card. But I think we're getting there.
David, last question before we let you go. Of course, we had the inflation print 6.1% for June, and Medallia now saying 3.5% might be by the end of the year the interest rate. Tell us, has that really affected the sector? Are you expecting that to hamper demand, especially when we talk about residential properties and people trying to get loans here?
Yes. So I think the biggest impact to the property market is that it is slowing down the phenomenon of going back to the office. Because many employees are saying, I don't like to work at home anymore. I am tired of mom and dad hovering over me or the kids or whatever. And I want to go back to the office, but it's just too expensive for me to do that. And not everyone can afford to shuttle everyone point to point. Number two, COVID continues to be an issue. Number three, the dorm market is going to cater again to the local users, the local employees, not just to the foreigners, precisely because it will be cheaper for them to rent a dorm than it is to commute, especially now when prices of fuel are continuing to climb. And it's come to the point where dorming is still going to be cheaper than commuting.
True.
In every sense of the word.
Okay, so very interesting points. There are a lot of things to digest. Thank you so much, David Leechiu, CEO of Leechiu Property Consultants.
Thank you.
And those are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate front today. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel. We are One News, all sides, all the time. Don't go away. We'll give you the latest on the local bourse when Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us.